So this happened last weekend and I'm still getting side-eyed glances from my cousins like I lit a priest on fire or something. My family is weird. I don't say that in the haha quirky aunt who knits kind of way, I mean weird. We have this annual tradition we call the funeral rehearsal dinner. Yeah. It's exactly what it sounds like. About 6 years ago, my great-uncle Ted died suddenly, and my grandmother, his sister, was distraught that she didn't get to say goodbye the way she wanted. At the post-funeral luncheon, between dry ham sandwiches and awkward silences, she loudly announced, "Next time, we're doing this before someone dies." Everyone laughed, but she was dead serious. The next year, we all got invites to a catered dinner at her house. Dress code, semi-formal. Theme, celebrating life while we're still alive. Ever since then, it's become a thing. Each year, a different living family member is honored, and we pretend it's their funeral, eulogies, memories, the whole 9 yards. Think of it like a birthday party mixed with a morbid school play. This year, it was Grandma's turn. She's 83, spry as hell, and very excited to hear what everyone would say about her if she dropped dead tomorrow. Enter me and my new girlfriend, Sarah. We'd been dating for 2 months. She's smart, funny, kind, and very, very normal. I hadn't told her about the event until the day before because I knew it sounded insane. But when I finally explained it, she was like, "That's kind of sweet." Weird, but sweet. I'll come. I should have taken that pause more seriously. We show up at my grandma's house, and Sarah looks radiant but a bit stiff. I introduce her around, and she makes a solid impression despite the setting. My Uncle Ken is already drunk, and the casket, yes, they rented a damn casket, is set up in the living room with a framed picture of Grandma on it. She's sitting in a recliner nearby, wearing a tiara, giggling every time someone calls her the dearly beloved. Sarah is doing her best to be polite, but I can tell it's all registering as a horror movie to her. Things get worse when the service begins. The family gathers around. My cousin Jason gives a heartfelt eulogy about how Grandma once helped him through a tough divorce. My mom follows, tearing up as she recalls Grandma teaching her how to make tamales. The tears are real, even though Grandma is sitting there wiping them away and whispering, "You're making me cry, stop it," like it's a roast instead of a requiem. Then it's my turn. I get up, take a deep breath, and deliver what I think is a solid mix of sincere and humorous memories. People laugh. Grandma beams. All seems well. But then Sarah raises her hand. My brain goes into DEFCON 1. "Can I say something?" she asks, looking directly at Grandma. The room goes quiet. I make panicked eye contact with her, silently begging her to sit down. She doesn't. Sarah steps forward, clears her throat, and delivers what I can only describe as the most painfully awkward, semi-passive-aggressive TED Talk in the history of eulogies. She starts with, "Though I've only known your grandson for a short time, I can already tell how much love he's received from you," which might explain some of his emotional immaturity. The air evaporates from the room. Grandma tilts her head like a confused cat. Then Sarah keeps going. "I think it's so beautiful that your family is able to be vulnerable like this, even if it does seem a little like emotional manipulation masquerading as bonding." At this point, my Aunt Linda actually gasps, like we're in a soap opera. Sarah goes on for another minute, unintentionally roasting every single person in the room by framing their traditions as questionable coping mechanisms and unprocessed generational trauma with snacks. I physically grab her elbow and gently steer her back into the guest chair like a bouncer at an improv night. My cousin whispers, "Bro, what the hell?" as I sit back down. Grandma blinks a few times, then just starts laughing. Not polite laughter, cackling, full-body wheezing. "I like her," she says, which sets off a confusing round of laughter from the older relatives and more quiet horror from the younger ones. Then dinner is served. I figured the worst was over. Nope. We sit down to eat, and I forget that the menu is Grandma's funeral favorites, which include weird Midwestern casseroles, Jell-O with shredded carrots in it, and something called funeral potatoes that look like they died in the oven twice. Sarah pokes at her plate like it's forensic evidence. She whispers, "Is this meat or memory foam?" I almost choke on my water. As if summoned by dark forces, my Uncle Ken, still drunk, stumbles over, leans in conspiratorially and says, "You know, this one time your boyfriend peed his pants at a county fair when he was 12. Cried for an hour. His dad had to buy him a souvenir apron because they ran out of pants." Sarah just nods, wide-eyed. Wow. Then Ken says, "Don't screw this one up. He's sensitive." I swear to God, she almost ran. By the time dessert is served, black forest cake with a little sugar headstone on top that says RIP GMA, Sarah is pale and quiet. She excuses herself to the bathroom for a moment to collect her thoughts. 10 minutes pass. Then 15. I find her out on the porch, smoking a cigarette she definitely didn't have when she came in. She doesn't even smoke. She found it in a planter. A planter. We drive home in silence. The next day, she texts me, "I think you're great, but I need some time to process all of that." We're still on speaking terms, but the vibe has definitely changed. And now my family refers to her as that grief critic girl. So yeah. TIFU by bringing my new girlfriend to a fake funeral for a very real, very alive grandma who still brings it up every time I visit. She keeps saying, "Tell her if she wants a sequel, I'm free in October." If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by trying to impress my girlfriend's dad with my handyman skills and almost setting his house on fire. So, for context, I, 29M, have been dating my girlfriend Emily, 27F, for about a year now. Things have been going great, she's smart, funny, gorgeous, all the things. But the one thing that's always kind of hung over us like a looming thundercloud is her dad, Frank. Frank is a man's man. He builds things. He fixes things. He drinks whiskey and chops firewood for fun. He looks like a hybrid of Ron Swanson and a lumberjack. He's also not exactly a fan of me. I work in tech. I once called AAA to change my tire. I have soft hands and drink oat milk. Basically, I'm everything Frank isn't. So when Emily told me her parents were hosting a weekend barbecue and that her dad would love to finally see me do something useful, I knew what time it was. This was my shot. My one chance to show Frank I could be more than a guy who backs up files to the cloud. I showed up that Saturday with my sleeves rolled up and a YouTube-inspired confidence. Frank greeted me with his usual gruff handshake and a look that said, "This better be good." After about 20 minutes of small talk and burgers, Frank pointed to a broken light fixture on the back porch and casually said, "Been meaning to fix that. Shame no one around here knows how." Challenge accepted. Now, I have some basic DIY knowledge. I've assembled IKEA furniture without the manual. I replaced a toilet seat once. How hard could a light fixture be? I told Frank I'd take care of it. He handed me his old toolkit like it was Excalibur. The screws were rusted, the wires were exposed, and the light had a visible wasp nest inside it. But I wasn't backing down. Emily gave me a look from across the yard, half pride, half fear. First mistake, I didn't shut the power off. Honestly, I thought the switch being off was enough. I later learned that's not how electricity works. I started unscrewing the old fixture, a little nervous about the wasps, but mostly focused on not looking like a coward in front of Frank. About halfway through removing it, I felt a zap. Nothing major, just enough to make my hand tingle and me to say ow in a pitch too high for Frank's liking. Frank came over, saw what I was doing, and said, "You shut the breaker off?" I nodded. I had not. He squinted. "You sure?" "Yep," I said, trying not to visibly sweat. He gave me the classic dad grunt of disapproval and walked off. I resumed my work, this time being a bit more cautious. I finally got the old fixture down and was proud of myself. Then came the rewiring. Now, here's where it all went to hell. I had watched a couple of YouTube videos earlier that week and remembered something about black wires being hot. But in my infinite wisdom, I assumed black meant don't touch and white was safe. I also didn't realize Frank's house was old and the wiring wasn't color-coded the way modern homes are. Long story short, I connected the wrong wires. Specifically, I connected a live wire directly to the metal frame of the new fixture. Proud of my work, I flipped the switch on. There was a loud pop, followed by a spark explosion that looked like a mini 4th of July in a light bulb. The fixture caught fire. Real, honest-to-God fire. Frank came running, Emily screamed, and I was smacking it with a dish towel I grabbed from the grill station like a lunatic. Frank shoved me out of the way and hit the breaker. The fire fizzled, but the porch was filled with smoke and the smell of burning plastic. The siding of the house was scorched. Emily's mom came out just in time to see her husband with a fire extinguisher, me holding a half-burned towel, and what used to be a perfectly fine light fixture now hanging in blackened, melted disgrace. Silence. Frank stared at me like I'd just set his dog on fire. "What the hell did you do?" Faulty wiring?" I offered, immediately regretting it. He didn't speak to me the rest of the day. Emily tried to make me feel better by saying things like, "He didn't completely hate you before and the siding needed updating anyway." I spent the next week watching actual electricians on YouTube. Real ones. Not the 5-minute hack videos by guys whose homes were probably held together with duct tape and dreams. I offered to pay for the damage, but Frank refused. "You did enough," he said, which somehow felt worse. The cherry on top? 2 weeks later, Frank invited Emily's ex over to help him build a shed. A literal ex-boyfriend. I asked Emily if that was some kind of subtle jab. She replied, "No, he just knows how to use a voltage tester." I'm now banned from touching anything electrical at their house. Possibly anything mechanical, flammable, or fragile too. My dreams of being the handyman hero are dead. I've gone back to what I know best, fixing Wi-Fi issues and organizing cable management. But at least the wasps are gone. This happened last month, but the fallout is still going strong and I'm just now able to tell it without wanting to crawl into a hole and stay there forever. My girlfriend Lena and I have been dating for a little over a year. She's German, born and raised near Stuttgart, and her family still lives there. We met in the States during her study abroad program and hit it off instantly. She's brilliant, beautiful, and has this dry, sarcastic humor that I'm a complete sucker for. We've talked about marriage in the distant future, and when she invited me to spend 3 weeks with her family over the holidays, I was over the moon. Now, I don't speak German. I took a couple of Duolingo lessons and can confidently say Die Katze trinkt Milch, which, as it turns out, is a tragically useless sentence in real life. But Lena had always told me her family spoke decent English and not to worry. Still, I wanted to impress them. I downloaded every language app one could find and crammed like I was studying for the bar. After 3 months, I could piece together some basic sentences and kind of understand if someone spoke really slowly while gesturing wildly. The real problem began when I landed in Germany and immediately fell victim to the Dunning-Kruger effect. You see, the moment I managed to greet her dad with Guten Abend, Herr Kruger. Es ist schon, Sie zu treffen, he beamed, patted me on the back like I'd just won a medal, and immediately launched into rapid-fire German that may as well have been ancient Sumerian. I panicked and just nodded enthusiastically, laughing when he laughed, frowning when he frowned. Apparently, that was convincing enough. Lena later told me her dad called her a lucky girl and that he was impressed her American boyfriend had such strong German roots. I should have corrected her. I should have come clean. But I didn't. Instead, I doubled down. For the rest of that day, I maintained the illusion that I was fluent, only speaking English when Lena's younger sister or her mom addressed me directly. The next day, things escalated. Her dad invited me to a cultural meetup he regularly attended. I asked Lena about it, and she said it was probably some local history or hiking group he was part of. Totally chill, she said. You'll be fine. So off I went, alone, with her dad, in a snow-covered VW, with a vocabulary limited to Ich bin müde and Wo ist die Toilette? We arrived at a small hall tucked between two quiet streets. Inside were about 30 middle-aged men, most with shaved heads, heavy boots, and military-style jackets. That was my first red flag. But then I saw a table with pastries and coffee and thought, maybe it's just a biker brunch or something? Oh, no. Her dad introduced me as Mein Zukunftstiger Schwiegerson aus Amerika, und ja, spricht sehr gut Deutsch, which I gathered meant something like, my future son-in-law from America, and yes, he speaks excellent German. The room broke into polite applause and nods. Then someone handed me a pamphlet. I looked at it, confused, until I saw the eagle emblem and a name that included the phrase Heimat und Stolz. I didn't know exactly what it meant, but I knew enough to feel a cold trickle of dread. The first speech began, and it became very clear, very quickly, that this was not a cultural meetup. It was a nationalist rally. Maybe not explicitly neo-Nazi, but if it wasn't, it was doing a damn good impression. The speaker was fiery and emotional, waving his arms, talking about tradition and das deutsche Blut. People were nodding, clapping. One guy even did the thing, asterisk, you know the thing asterisk, but it was subtle enough not to get attention. I was frozen. I didn't know what to do. If I left, I'd have to explain why. If I stayed, I'd be complicit. I made the worst possible choice. I stayed and tried to look politely interested, my brain screaming in panic as my understanding of German failed me at every sentence. The second speaker started talking about immigrants and American degeneracy, and her dad nudged me and smiled like we were bonding. I think I threw up in my mouth a little. Then, because the universe hates me, they invited me to speak. I don't know if it was a tradition or a way of welcoming guests or if her dad just wanted to show off, but suddenly I was being introduced again, this time as an Ehrengast aus Übersee, and handed a microphone. Everyone clapped. I stood, walked to the front, and stared at 30 people who thought I was one of them. I did the only thing I could think of. I faked a coughing fit so bad it would have gotten me banned from a pre-COVID restaurant. I doubled over, hacking, tears in my eyes, waving away the mic and shaking my head. Her dad patted me on the back and said something about Reiskrankheit, travel sickness. I gave a thumbs up and sat down, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so loud I thought it would be mistaken for applause. When we finally left, her dad said something about how proud he was that I hadn't forgotten my heritage. I nodded, muttering ja, Naderlich, and swore I'd come clean the moment we got home. I didn't. I wish I could say I had a noble reason. I didn't want to hurt her, didn't want to risk her thinking I was making fun of her culture. But really, I was just a coward. I hoped it would all blow over and we'd never have to talk about it again. Until 2 days later, when Lena's dad posted a picture of me on Facebook. There I am, in front of that hall, standing next to him and 2 other men, smiling like a goddamn idiot. The caption read, "A wonderful night with my future son-in-law. German roots run deep." One of Lena's college friends saw it and messaged her. She translated the caption. Googled the emblem. Put the pieces together. Lena confronted me that night, calmly at first, but by the end she was crying, furious, and asking me if I was some kind of alt-right sympathizer. It took me hours to explain what happened, to convince her I was just an idiot trying to impress her family. She believed me, eventually, but her dad? Not so much. When she told him I didn't actually speak German and didn't understand what the event really was, he accused her of trying to erase his culture. We left early. She's still talking to her mom and sister, but things are strained. Her dad hasn't spoken to her, or me, since. I'm now enrolled in a legitimate German language course and planning to fly back solo this summer to try and make peace. Assuming I don't get detained at customs for showing up on some watch list. Let this be a lesson: if you're gonna fake a skill to impress someone's parents, maybe choose something less dangerous. Like juggling chainsaws. TIFU by accidentally turning my neighbor's kid into a local cryptid. So this happened last fall, but I only now feel emotionally prepared to share the story. To preface, I live in a semi-rural town that's not quite suburban, not quite out in the sticks, that weird middle zone with cul-de-sacs and cornfields. People here are friendly but nosy. If you sneeze too loud, someone's posting on the local Facebook group asking who died. I rent the guest house behind my landlord's property. He's an older guy named Ron, super chill, lives in the main house. Across the street is a family with 2 kids. One of them is a quiet 12-year-old named Ethan, a typical latchkey kid, into video games, biking around, always wearing the same faded hoodie with a dragon on the back. Now, I'm a wildlife biology grad student working on my thesis about nocturnal animal behavior. Specifically, I was experimenting with different combinations of sense and motion to attract certain species, raccoons, possums, foxes, to a baited camera setup I'd installed in the woods behind my place. Totally legit and permitted. Anyway, I'd been tweaking a formula involving a mix of old sardines, rotten fruit puree, and a synthetic skunk musk I'd ordered online. The smell could knock out a buffalo, but damn if it didn't draw in some curious critters. I'd noticed an uptick in traffic on my motion cams, even got footage of a bobcat once, so I figured I was onto something. So one Thursday, I prepped a fresh batch of the scent cocktail, loaded up the bait station, and headed back inside. A storm was rolling in, so I didn't expect much that night. But the next morning, I checked the footage and there was movement. But not the kind I expected. At around 9:30 p.m., my camera picked up a figure. 2 legs. Human height. The footage was grainy, but it looked like someone walking on all 4s, kind of spider-like. It paused in front of the bait, sniffed, then sprinted out of frame. The kicker? Glowing eyes. I blinked at the screen for a solid minute thinking, no way. I watched it again. Still weird. I assumed it was a camera glitch. Maybe a raccoon got too close and distorted the image. I forgot about it. But then people started talking. 2 days later, someone posted in the town Facebook group, saw something strange in the woods behind Jefferson Lane. Big, fast, had glowing eyes. Anyone know if we've got mountain lions here? The comments exploded. Maybe a coyote, possum with mange, swamp gas, the usual. Then the local high schoolers got involved. Someone made a TikTok with my footage, which I now suspect my neighbor's kid somehow got a hold of, still don't know how. They slowed it down, added creepy music, and dubbed it the Jefferson Goblin. Within a week, it was a full-blown cryptid panic. People were posting blurry nighttime pics of random animals claiming they saw the goblin. Someone made t-shirts. A local brewery even named their fall ale after it. I was mortified. It was my camera, my bait, my footage. But I didn't want to say anything because, 1, I was technically not supposed to be experimenting that close to the residential area, and 2, it was honestly kind of hilarious. Then came the worst part. About 2 weeks after goblin fever kicked off, I was grabbing a coffee at the gas station when I overheard 2 teenagers talking. Dude, I swear it was Ethan, one said. He's been acting weird as hell. Said he goes into the woods at night. Saw him crawl out from behind the gas station dumpster last week with a dead squirrel. I froze. Ethan? The neighbor kid? I got home and kept an eye out. That night, around 11, I saw movement outside my window. I peeked through the blinds and, I kid you not, saw Ethan on all 4s, crawling into the woods. Hoodie on. glowing eyes. I nearly peed myself. Turns out, Ethan had discovered my bait station weeks ago. I'd been dumping this revolting scent mix in the same spot, and the kid, for reasons I still don't fully understand, had taken to rubbing it on himself and sneaking around the woods to scare people. I know this because the next day I found him passed out near the bait bucket, covered in raccoon scratches, reeking like he fought a dumpster for dominance. I woke him up, dragged him back to his house, and sat him down like I was about to give the birds and bees talk. Apparently, he thought it was funny. He'd seen my setup, found the mix, and figured it would be hilarious to prank people. The glowing eyes? Flashlight taped to a bike helmet with green cellophane. The crawling? He said it made him look less human. So I had a choice. Tell the town the goblin was a dirty 12-year-old with a YouTube channel and ruin the fun, or let it ride. I let it ride. But I made Ethan promise to cut it out before he got himself shot by some terrified farmer. He agreed, reluctantly, and the goblin sightings slowly died down. Now it's spring again, and sometimes when I walk through the woods, I still catch a faint whiff of that horrible scent mix on the wind. The bait station's gone, and I've moved on to a new project involving owl calls, but every now and then someone will still bring up the Jefferson Goblin like it was real. Last week, Ron had friends over for poker, and I overheard him say, "I swear, that thing had to be real." My cousin's dog wouldn't go near the woods for days. Ethan winked at me from across the yard. I don't know what's worse, that I accidentally created a local cryptid, or that I kind of miss the little freak. TIFU by misunderstanding what open relationship meant. This happened about 6 months ago, but the psychological damage is still very, very fresh. I, 28M, had been dating Claire, 27F, for about 9 months. Everything was great. She was smart, funny, creative, and we had that kind of rare, electric chemistry that makes the air around you feel charged when you're together. You know, the kind of connection that makes you want to build IKEA furniture without arguing. We met through mutual friends at a Halloween party. I was dressed as a sentient traffic cone. She was dressed as a slutty Shakespeare. It was meant to be. Things were going so well that we started spending nearly every night together, either at her place or mine. About 5 months in, we had the talk, you know, the "where is this going?" conversation. That's when Claire dropped the term open relationship. I paused. She saw my reaction and quickly clarified, "I just think people can love more than one person. But that doesn't mean we don't care about each other." She told me it was just philosophical for her. That she wasn't seeing anyone else. That she was happy with me. "It's just something I believe in," she said. I wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea, but I'd read enough Reddit threads to know that different strokes and all that. Plus, she said she wasn't seeing anyone else, so I figured, okay. She's into the idea theoretically, but practically we're still just us. So, I nodded and said I could live with that as long as we were open about it. "Of course," she said. "Communication is everything." Fast forward to about 2 months later. We're still going strong. She's still at my place 3 to 4 nights a week. Things seem normal, maybe even better. She's glowing. She's extra affectionate. She started bringing me breakfast burritos out of nowhere. I should have known. I should have seen it. Hindsight is a greasy-haired clown whispering "you dumbass" in my ear. Now comes the foo. Claire was out of town for a weekend visiting her sister in another city. I had the apartment to myself, and I was determined to do absolutely nothing. Pure degenerate-level laziness. I wore the same hoodie for 3 days. Ordered nothing but takeout. My toilet paper ran out, and I used paper towels for 24 hours until I could drag myself to CVS. On Sunday night, I decided to clean up a bit before she got back. While vacuuming the floor, I noticed something strange near the couch. A little velvet pouch. Now, this wasn't mine, and I didn't think Claire would have dropped something and not picked it up before leaving. I opened it. Inside were 2 gold rings. Matching. Engraved. One said C plus J and the other said, forever and always. My brain went full Windows XP error sound. First, I thought maybe they were some kind of gift in progress. But then, who the hell was J? I stared at the rings for what must have been 15 minutes. My internal monologue was spiraling into a full-on telenovela. I ended up doing what every rational man in his late 20s does when he's not emotionally equipped for this level of curveball. I called my ex, Abby. Abby is like a slightly judgmental therapist who's read too many murder mysteries. She heard me out and said, dude, you're in a love triangle. You need to talk to her. Immediately. Claire came back Monday. I waited until we were curled up on the couch, sipping wine, pretending like I hadn't found her secret treasure bag. Finally, I asked as casually as I could, hey, what do you think about engagement rings? She froze. That's sudden, she said, laughing nervously. I nodded. Well, I found some. Her entire face did this thing I can only describe as buffering. Then she said the worst possible sentence I've ever heard in my life, oh my God, I thought I lost those. Not denied. Not explained. Just admitted. I asked, Claire, who's Jay? She looked at me like I'd just asked her how to spell dog. Then, without a hint of hesitation, she says, Jared. My fiancé. My ears didn't process that sentence in the right order. You're what? Fiancé, she repeated, like I was the one being weird. Cue my soul ejecting from my body like a fighter pilot. She explained, very calmly, that she'd been engaged to Jared for over a year. That they were in an open relationship and had agreed to see other people before settling down. That I was, in her words, a meaningful experience. I sat there, doing quick math in my head, trying to understand how someone could be engaged and simultaneously monogamous with me for 9 months without it ever coming up. I reminded her of all our dates, trips, the weekends we spent together. Christmas with my parents. I cooked her dad's lasagna recipe for her birthday. I met her goddamn cat's vet. She just nodded and said, yeah, I know. You're great. But I never lied. I said I believed in open relationships. I responded, believing in ghosts doesn't mean you're haunting someone, Claire. She did not appreciate that metaphor. It all ended, obviously. Very quickly. I asked her to leave. She cried. I cried. The burrito place I liked started tasting like betrayal. The kicker? About 3 weeks after she left, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Jared. He said, hey man. Just wanted to say no hard feelings. Claire said you took it hard. Hope you're doing okay. I did not respond. Mostly because I didn't trust myself not to send back a photo of the rings in a toilet bowl. Now I'm in therapy. Dating again. Cautiously. And when people say they're into open relationships, I ask them to define every single term like we're signing a mortgage together. So yeah. TIFU by thinking an open relationship meant the same thing to both of us, when really, I was a character in someone else's pre-wedding bachelor phase. TIFU, and by today I mean a few days ago, but the fallout is still unraveling like an ill-advised scarf knitted from cursed yarn. So I live in a quiet cul-de-sac in suburban Pennsylvania. Picture the kind of place where people wave at each other from across driveways, and the biggest scandal in the past decade was someone painting their fence magenta. It's cozy, it's quiet, and it's catastrophically unprepared for the dumb storm I just unleashed. It all started when I was walking my dog, Moxie, late at night. She's a weird mix between a corgi and something with the energy of a squirrel on espresso. That night, she tugged me toward the woods behind our street, something she never does. I figured maybe she needed to drop a particularly philosophical poop or wanted to chase phantom squirrels. But no, she was laser-focused on something deeper in the trees. We get to a little clearing about 200 yards in, and I see this thing. A circle of rocks, like a fire pit, but too perfectly arranged. Inside the circle were a bunch of weirdly shaped sticks, what looked like feathers, and, most unsettlingly, what I was pretty sure was a doll's head. Not a full doll. Just the head. Burned. Naturally, like any rational adult, I took a photo of it. Moxie, having satisfied her curiosity, or maybe completed her arcane ritual, turned tail and pulled me back toward home. At the time, I figured it was some teens doing weird forest things, shrugged it off, and posted the photo to our neighborhood Facebook group with a caption like, "Anyone know what this is? Found it in the woods behind Maple Ridge. Vibes are concerning." Now, I should explain, our neighborhood Facebook group is basically digital kindergarten for grown-ups. People argue over trash can placement and passive-aggressively post about dog poop. So I expected maybe a couple comments, a laugh react, and someone blaming the Johnson kids again. What I got instead was DEFCON 1 panic. Within an hour, people were screenshotting my post and sharing it. A woman named Trudy, who once started a 3-week campaign over 2 bright porch lights, declared it was a sign of pagan animal sacrifice. A guy named Carl, who claims to have been law enforcement adjacent, he was a mall cop, said it looked eerily similar to cult activity he saw in '97. Another person claimed to have seen robed figures near the woods at night, which turned out to be teenagers vaping in hoodies. By morning, the post had over 200 comments. Someone started a thread titled Maple Ridge Cult? And suggested we form a neighborhood watch. By that evening, people were patrolling with flashlights and walkie-talkies. Trudy made laminated badges that said Wilderness Defense Squad. There were spreadsheets. Schedules. Carl tried to deputize himself. At first, I found it hilarious. I kept my mouth shut, figuring it would blow over. But then someone called the local news. And they actually showed up. A guy with too perfect hair interviewed me while I tried to explain, I don't really know what it was, just something weird in the woods, but they edited the clip to make it sound like I was confirming the presence of a sacrificial pit. Headline that night, occult activity in local suburb? Residents say yes. I started getting DMs from strangers asking if I felt watched or if I'd noticed any unusual animal behavior. I made the mistake of replying to one of them with, "Well, my dog farted and scared herself once, does that count?" And that got screenshotted and reposted with the caption, "They're affecting the pets now." Then, the real chaos started. Someone decided we needed to cleanse the woods. On Saturday, about 30 people showed up armed with sage bundles, salt circles, crosses, and one guy had a full-on didgeridoo. I don't know what that was supposed to do, maybe confuse the spirits. They marched into the trees chanting and waving smoke around, which resulted in one minor brush fire and 2 people getting lost for 3 hours. They were in a drainage ditch. Meanwhile, actual teenagers saw the commotion and, being teenagers, decided to escalate. They started leaving creepy dolls in the woods, drawing fake runes in chalk on sidewalks, and at one point, they tied a Furby to a tree and recorded it saying "Feed me" on loop. Things were spiraling. I was now unintentionally the neighborhood's oracle. People kept asking me for updates, theories, and advice. One woman said she had a dream where I was wearing antlers and guiding people through the forest like a woodland prophet. Carl said he was ready to die for the cause, which no one asked him to do. I finally cracked when someone taped a note to my door that said, "We know you're the chosen finder. Please lead us to the truth." Nope. Too much. Time to shut it down. So I went back to the woods, took a closer look at the ritual site, and realized something critical. It wasn't feathers. It was stuffing. Like from a pillow. The doll head? A melted Barbie someone probably tossed into a campfire. The sticks? Arranged around an old, rusted grill grate. I checked further and found beer cans, a half-buried bag of Doritos, and what might have been the remains of a bang. This wasn't a summoning circle. This was a crappy teenage hangout that someone tried to make spooky for laughs. I posted an update, gently explaining the discovery, with photos. I made it clear there was no cult, No rituals, just some creative delinquents with poor hygiene and access to fire. And then I got accused of being in on it. Apparently, that's exactly what the cult would want us to think, so now, it's been 3 days since I tried to de-escalate. The Facebook group is still ablaze. Carl is starting a podcast. Trudy ordered walkie-talkies shaped like pentagrams to infiltrate the enemy. Someone made t-shirts that say, "I survived the Maple Ridge cult" with my dog's face on them. Meanwhile, I just wanted to walk my dog in peace and maybe not have to explain to my boss why I was interviewed on local TV under the cheerin', "Local man stumbles upon a cult forest portal." So yeah. That's how I accidentally launched a suburban LARP gone wild and might now be the unwitting leader of a fake neighborhood cult that believes I commune with forest spirits. And Moxie? She keeps dragging me back to that same spot in the woods like she knows exactly what she did. So this happened last weekend, and I'm still dodging texts and pretending my phone accidentally reset because of a mysterious update. Let me explain how a harmless white lie involving a fake baby spiraled into a full-blown scandal that torched my dignity and possibly ended a friendship. I'm 31M, and my girlfriend, let's call her Emma, 29F, and I were invited to her college friend's wedding. We'd been dating a year, but this was my first time meeting a lot of her friends in person. The wedding was fancy. Black tie. Open bar. Assigned seating. One of those weddings where you start calculating your outfit cost and whether you can pawn your watch for rent next month. The problem was, I did not want to go. It was 2 hours away, I had a big project due Monday, and I was already wiped from my week. But Emma begged me to come, and I agreed, reluctantly. In a moment of sarcasm meets desperation, I said, "God, I wish we had a baby. Then we'd have an excuse to leave early." Emma looked at me, paused, and said, "What if we did?" Now, any rational adult would have stopped there. But not me. I should mention that Emma works in prop design for a local theater and owns a disturbingly realistic baby doll from a previous stage production. It's used for scenes where the baby gets dropped or thrown, don't ask. The thing weighs about 6 pounds, smells faintly like lavender, and looks exactly like a newborn if you glance at it from a distance. So we devised a plan. We'd bring the fake baby in a carrier, claim our babysitter canceled last minute, and after the ceremony, realize that we had to leave early because the baby was getting fussy. No harm done, right? We even named him Oliver to keep it consistent. Day of the wedding, we arrived dressed to the nines, and Emma's got this fake baby strapped to her chest in a wrap, little knit hat and everything. We play it cool. People love babies. We got so many compliments, and Emma even got out of having to hold drinks because she's breastfeeding. It was going flawlessly. Then the bride, Lila, comes up to greet us. I'd never met her before, and she's glowing with post-ceremony energy, crying every 5 minutes and hugging everyone like she's been resurrected. She loses her mind over Oliver. "Oh my God. I didn't even know you had a baby. You brought a baby to my wedding? You're amazing." Emma tries to brush it off like, "Oh, we were gonna leave early anyway, he's a handful," but Lila is already summoning her photographer. Let me paint the scene. Emma's holding a fake baby, dressed in formal wear. I'm beside her, doing the smile grimace of someone who knows he's about 5 seconds from disaster. Lila grabs Emma's arm, says we have to get a picture with the baby, and drags her toward the photo backdrop. Before we can object, the photographer, this absolute menace of a man, is already snapping away. Now we're stuck. Emma's holding the baby stiffly, like he's made of uranium, and I'm smiling like a hostage. The photographer coos and squeaks at Oliver. Lila starts crying again. It is pure chaos. And then, the maid of honor, Lila's younger sister, who is very drunk at this point, leans over to look at Oliver and says, "Wait, is he breathing?" I should have faked a heart attack or screamed fire or just sprinted into the woods. But no. I said, "Oh, he's just sleeping. He's a really deep sleeper." To which the sister goes, babies don't sleep like that. His head is all floppy. Emma, in a panic, adjusts the wrap and in doing so, accidentally decapitates the fake baby. Okay, that sounds worse than it is. The head didn't fall off, but it flopped back at an impossible angle, like he was mid-exorcism. The whole wrap shifted, and the baby's fake arm dangled loose. The photographer, still clicking away, stopped mid-shot and said, "What the hell?" Now there's a group forming. Someone gasps. Someone says, "Is the baby okay?" Someone else says, "I think it's a doll." Emma looks at me, eyes wide, and whispers, "Abort. Abort." I grab the baby, who now looks fully unhinged, and say, "We need to go. Oliver's not feeling well." And we speedwalk out like we just shoplifted from Tiffany's. Once we get to the car, we sit in silence. Then Emma just loses it. Laughing so hard she's crying, holding fake Oliver like he's our shame baby. But it doesn't end there. Because someone at the wedding, bless their nosy little soul, posted one of the baby photos on Instagram. With the caption, "Cutest surprise guest, Oliver," and tagged Emma. And you can see the baby's floppy demon neck if you zoom in. The comments section was pure gold for about 6 hours before reality hit. Someone tagged another friend. That friend DM'd Emma. Then someone else messaged Lila. And that's when the group chat erupted. Apparently Lila is furious. She thought we were mocking her wedding, making it about us, and pulling a TikTok prank. She even accused us of trying to go viral, which, to be fair, we probably could have if we'd had less shame and better lighting. Emma tried to apologize, explained the babysitter excuse, and said we never meant to cause a scene. But Lila's still not speaking to her. A few of her friends think it's hilarious. One even wants to borrow fake Oliver for her wedding because she's trying to get out early too. But yeah. Bridges may have been burned. Possibly nuked. And now Emma and I are immortalized in a wedding album, next to a table arrangement and a baby that's not real, in one of the cringiest series of photos I've ever been in. To top it all off, Emma got a text yesterday from the photographer offering a family package for more portraits. So, yeah. TIFU by creating a fake child, bringing it to a wedding, and letting him go full Chuck E. Cheese animatronic during photos. TIFU by pretending to be fluent in Japanese to impress a girl and ending up on a live Japanese game show. So, this happened about 6 months ago, but I'm only now mentally stable enough to talk about it. For context, I, 29M, live in Vancouver, work in tech, and have a very unfortunate combination of a massive ego and zero ability to say no when I'm trying to impress someone. About a year ago, I met a girl named Keiko at a mutual friend's birthday party. She was Japanese, had recently moved here for grad school, and had that graceful, quiet confidence that made every guy in the room orbit around her. Naturally, I did the only thing my monkey brain could think of, I lied. When she mentioned she missed speaking Japanese, I heard my mouth say, "Oh yeah, I speak a little Japanese." Which was technically true, if by a little you mean I took a Duolingo course for like 4 days before giving up when it stopped being about sushi and started being about verb conjugation. But Keiko's eyes lit up and she said, "Really? That's so cool." And my brain went, well, guess we're doing this now. What started as a harmless white lie spiraled fast. We started texting. She'd throw in the occasional Japanese phrase, and I'd frantically copy-paste it into Google Translate like a raccoon on cocaine. I got good at faking it. I memorized stock phrases. I made my keyboard switchable to hiragana. I even started watching anime again, not for fun, but as research. About a month later, Keiko invited me to a Japanese language mixer night hosted by her university's Japanese Cultural Society. This was my first oh no moment, but I figured I could wing it. Most of the people there were language learners anyway, right? Wrong. It was packed with actual Japanese students and native speakers. And for some cursed reason, they had us do a language proficiency speed dating round where you rotate through 3-minute conversations entirely in Japanese. And that's when the second oh no moment hit. Keiko had told the organizers that I was fluent. Fluent. I was paired with an older Japanese man named Daisuke, who later turned out to be Keiko's uncle. He was visiting from Osaka and had taught Japanese for 30 years. I don't remember much of our 3-minute conversation except that I panicked and just started listing Pokemon. Like, I literally sat there and went. Daisuke stared at me like I was having a stroke. Keiko was across the room, waving and smiling. I wanted to die. After the mixer, I tried to ghost her, but Keiko texted me asking if I wanted to go to this Japanese TV event happening in town. Apparently, her uncle had pulled some strings and gotten us on the list. I didn't want to go. I almost said no. But then she texted it'll be fun. Maybe they'll ask you to be on camera since your Japanese is so good, and my lizard brain went, oh, this is salvageable. Spoiler, it was not. The event was a traveling variety game show from Japan called Crazy Challenge Time. Yes, that's the actual translated name. They were filming a special segment with Japanese nationals abroad and a few honorary guests. Thanks to Keiko's uncle, I got pulled on stage as one of the guests. The producer handed me a microphone and said something fast in Japanese. I caught exactly 0% of it, smiled, and bowed. Then the host turned to me and said, in Japanese, so I hear you're fluent. Let's play a game where you translate some of our trickiest tongue twisters and idioms into English in front of a live audience. I tried to bail. I really did. I started to say, which means, please wait a moment, but I pronounced it so badly that the host thought I was making a joke and the audience laughed. Then someone handed me a cue card. It had what looked like an essay of kanji on it. The host pointed and said, go. I froze. My fight or flight instincts failed me. Instead, my brain hit the self-destruct button. I took the mic and said in the most confident voice I've ever managed, then just blurted out. For those unfamiliar, I said, I am toilet. There was a pause. Then the audience howled with laughter. I'm not talking polite giggles. I'm talking full-on, camera-shaking, tear-streaming laughter. The host doubled over. One of the producers was clapping. A woman in the front row started crying. Someone yelled. Encore. I had accidentally become the comedic highlight of the night. After that, they made me the foreign fool recurring character for the rest of the show. I was too mortified to say no. I got dunked into a ball pit, tried and failed to answer riddles, and at one point was blindfolded and made to guess if I was touching a fruit or a sea creature. Spoiler, it was a squid. Keiko thought it was hilarious. She actually told me afterward, you're so funny, I didn't know you were such a good performer. I wanted to explain. I really did. But instead, I just laughed along and said something that I thought meant thanks for inviting me, but apparently meant thank you for birthing me, because Keiko's uncle started choking on his tea. She never brought up my Japanese again, thank God. We actually dated for another 2 months before breaking up, amicably, I swear. Turns out she had a thing for chaotic energy. But to this day, I still get tagged in clips from that show. Apparently, my I am toilet moment became a meme in some Japanese internet circles. I'm known as Toilet Kuin. There's even fan art. I wish I was kidding. So yeah. TIFU by pretending to speak Japanese and ending up a national laughingstock with a nickname that will haunt me forever. But hey, at least now I really started learning the language. Out of shame. Hey, friends. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU by letting my neighbor's cat into my smart home. I don't mean that in a LOL silly cat knocked over a lamp kind of way. I inadvertently allowed a tiny orange demon to take control of my entire life through the unchecked chaos that is automation. Let me set the stage. I live in a smart home. Not the kind where you ask Alexa to play lofi beats and call it a day, but the full Tony Stark fantasy. I'm a freelance systems engineer and I've spent the last 3 years wiring every inch of my home to respond to voice commands, proximity sensors, facial recognition, and app integration. Smart blinds. Smart fridge. Smart pet feeder. I don't have a pet, I just thought it was cool. Smart shower that sets the temperature based on body data. Smart locks. The works. The problem started last Tuesday when my neighbor Rachel knocked on my door in a panic. Her cat, Mr. Nibbles, had escaped again. Mr. Nibbles is a deceptively adorable orange tabby with the energy of a raccoon on bath salts. He's broken into my backyard before, clawed up my drone, and once managed to wedge himself between my solar panel array and the roof like some kind of feline Tetris block. I offered to help look, and naturally, he was sitting smugly on my porch like he hadn't just inspired a neighborhood-wide search. Rachel scooped him up, but I said, "Why don't you let him chill here a bit while you grab his carrier? He seems to like my place." She hesitated, probably because she knows my place is basically a prototype AI house, but agreed. That's where everything began to fall apart. First of all, my security system is facially calibrated to recognize me and authorized guests. This includes Rachel, the UPS guy, and for some godforsaken reason, Mr. Nibbles. You see, a few weeks ago I was playing around with facial recognition for pet monitoring, and during a testing phase I scanned Mr. Nibbles' face as a joke. Apparently, I never deleted his profile. So when Rachel left and the door closed behind her, the house still recognized Mr. Nibbles as a resident. He immediately made a beeline for the living room and jumped onto the couch, activating the pressure sensors which turned on the TV. That in itself wouldn't be a big deal, except the last thing I watched was a YouTube playlist about emergency survival bunkers, so now my house thought we were in some sort of apocalyptic scenario. In response, the house triggered Safe Mode Alpha, a subroutine I'd built for hypothetical emergencies. Lights dimmed to 30%, doors locked, blinds closed, the HVAC switched to air purification mode, and the fridge dispensed 2 liters of filtered water into a stainless steel jug with a loud clunk. I was in the bathroom at the time, trying to fix a loose tile in the smart shower system, when I got a push notification, emergency protocol activated, secure mode enabled followed by resident, Mr. Nibbles confirmed. I froze. I tried to yell, override, but the system was in a lockdown phase that ignored voice commands unless I manually input a code into the main hub. The hub is in my bedroom. The door to which had now sealed itself shut, because again, my home thought we were living in Fallout 4. I ran to the bedroom door and slammed my fist against it while yelling at the cat, who was now curled up on my pillow like a smug, purring dictator. No response from the system. The manual code could also be entered from my phone, but my phone was in the bedroom charging. I had my smartwatch, which, of course, was connected to the system, but because of the lockdown, it could only make emergency calls. So I tried that. I called 911. I had to explain to a very confused dispatcher that no, there was no intruder, no fire, no gas leak, my house was just under the command of a cat. They sent someone anyway. While I waited, Mr. Nibbles began triggering more chaos. He somehow turned on the robotic vacuum by knocking a rubber band onto the floor, which it detected as foreign object intrusion. The vacuum, which I had once rigged with a GoPro for home mapping, started rolling around aimlessly like a drunken Roomba, bumping into things and setting off motion alarms. Then the smart oven beeped. I don't know how, but the cat had managed to activate the oven's self-cleaning cycle, which locks the door and heats to 900 degrees Fahrenheit. The house now thought I was attempting to sterilize food supplies, which meant the fridge began vacuum sealing all perishables into metallic bags. I watched through the glass as my eggs, milk, and leftover lasagna disappeared into airtight hell. A notification popped up on the watch, nutrient storage complete. 14 days of food remaining. It was then I realized Mr. Nibbles had stepped on the bug-out prep scenario. A setting I made as a joke during COVID that simulated quarantine readiness in case of bioterrorism or zombie outbreaks. The front doorbell rang. I sprinted to the door, yelling at my watch to authorize emergency personnel, which thankfully worked. The fire department and one very bewildered police officer stood on my lawn, staring at my now pitch-dark windows and watching as my security system projected containment protocol active across the glass like I was housing a nuclear test subject. I explained everything as best I could, but Mr. Nibbles, being a cat, had now vanished somewhere inside the walls. Literally. The little gremlin had squeezed into the vent system, which caused the HVAC to go into biohazard filtration mode. Alarms were going off, air filters were cycling, and the police officer radioed in something about potential chemical threat but probably just a cat. They escorted me out after using bolt cutters on the door. It took 4 hours for me to override the system manually, during which Mr. Nibbles reappeared, completely unconcerned, and took a nap on the fire truck. Rachel showed up right as I was being mildly interrogated by a hazmat tech. She picked up Mr. Nibbles, apologized profusely, and offered me banana bread. I couldn't even be mad. The cat had played the system, and still looked like a sleepy cinnamon roll doing it. I had to spend the next 2 days resetting every automation routine, reprogramming facial recognition, and removing all pets, and throwing out 40 pounds of vacuum-sealed groceries. My house still occasionally plays bunker safety tips at 3 a.m. because it thinks I'm in training. So yeah. TIFU by letting my neighbor's cat into my smart home. TIFU by accidentally getting my best friend arrested and ruining his career. It started out like any other Saturday. My best friend, Mike, and I had been planning a weekend trip to the mountains for months. We had everything lined up. The gear, the snacks, the playlist for the road trip, and, of course, my trusty old Subaru that we'd always taken on our little adventures. There was just one small problem. I'd made the rookie mistake of misplacing my wallet the day before we were supposed to leave. Classic, right? So, naturally, I did what any rational person would do in that situation. I started panicking. No wallet meant no ID, no cards, and worst of all, no way to buy any of the crucial road trip snacks. This was a disaster. I'd been looking forward to the trip for weeks, and now, without my ID, I couldn't even rent a cabin if we needed one. I was an adult in a full-blown meltdown. Mike, ever the calm one, offered a solution. Dude, just use my ID. We're the same height, same build, no one will even notice. Plus, you can't go on a trip without snacks. At first, I hesitated. It seemed a little sketchy to use someone else's ID, but Mike was so convincing, and honestly, I was so desperate that I agreed. I grabbed his wallet and stuffed it into my back pocket. The plan was simple. We'd head to the convenience store on the way out of town, grab some chips, candy, and whatever else we'd need for the trip, and then we'd just keep driving without a hitch. Mike assured me that no one would even question it because we looked alike. Well, that's where I went wrong. We pulled into the gas station just outside town, the one where everyone knows everyone, and I walked in confidently, Mike's ID in hand. I didn't even think twice about it. Everything was going smoothly until I approached the counter to pay. The cashier, a woman named Janet who knew Mike from his high school days, squinted at the ID I handed her. Mike, she asked, giving me a long look. I froze for a moment. I knew Janet well enough to know she was a stickler for details, and she'd never forget a face. I should have just turned around and walked out at that moment. But instead, I smiled awkwardly and nodded. Yeah, just got a new picture, you know? The one at the DMV was terrible. Janet didn't look convinced. She slowly slid the ID across the counter and stared at me, eyes narrowing. Are you sure? You look a little different. Have you been working out or something? I laughed nervously and tried to play it off. Yeah, you know, gym, new routine. Been busy with work. But say Mike, just, different vibes today. She was still eyeing me like I was a suspect in a police lineup. I could tell she wasn't buying it, but thankfully, she rang up the items and handed me the bags. But the look on her face said everything. I could feel my heart rate go through the roof. I rushed out of the store, hoping I'd just narrowly avoided disaster. But as I climbed back into the car and handed Mike's ID back to him, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't until a few minutes later, when we were just about to hit the highway, that everything came crashing down. Mike's phone buzzed. He looked down at it, his face instantly going pale. "Shit," he muttered, glancing at me. "Dude, what's wrong?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "It's Janet. She just called me," Mike said, his voice filled with panic. "She said she thinks someone used my ID to buy stuff at the store today. She thinks it was you." I felt a chill run down my spine. I tried to laugh it off, but Mike didn't crack a smile. "I told you, man, this is bad. I thought she was just being paranoid." But I don't know, we both fell silent, the reality of the situation hitting us. I'd used Mike's ID. Janet had recognized me, and now she was suspicious. And that wasn't even the worst part. A few minutes after Mike hung up, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from a local news outlet. The headline was something along the lines of, "Man attempts fraud using stolen ID at local convenience store." I nearly had a heart attack when I saw it. The article was about someone attempting to use a fake ID to make a purchase at the same gas station. Janet had reported the incident to the authorities, and now there was a police investigation underway. It didn't take long before the situation spiraled even further. Mike's phone was blowing up with calls from his boss, his mom, and worst of all, his lawyer. Apparently, using someone else's ID wasn't just a minor thing. It was considered identity theft, a felony. At this point, I was panicking too. I hadn't stolen anything, but I had effectively used a fake ID, Mike's ID. And now Mike was in real trouble because of it. We spent the next few hours trying to fix things, but it only got worse. Janet had been pressured into giving a statement to the cops about the incident, and when they traced the ID back to Mike, they came knocking at his door. I felt horrible. Here I was, the idiot who thought using a friend's ID was no big deal. I'd unintentionally set off a chain of events that had Mike looking at potential criminal charges. We decided we needed to talk to an attorney immediately. Mike was scared. He had just gotten a promotion at work, and if he was convicted of a felony, his career would be over. I kept apologizing, but I knew it was too late to take it back. The damage was done. After days of tense phone calls and meetings with Mike's lawyer, we finally managed to convince the authorities that there was no malintent. It was a huge relief when they decided to drop the charges. Mike was still left with a tarnished reputation, but at least he wasn't facing jail time. As for me, I learned a pretty important lesson about using someone else's ID, even if they're your best friend. You never really think things through until you're staring down the barrel of a criminal investigation. Mike and I still went on the trip to the mountains. It wasn't the same, though. We didn't talk much during the drive, both of us lost in our thoughts. It took a while for Mike to fully forgive me, but we're good now. The lesson I learned, however, stuck with me. Never, under any circumstances, use your friend's ID, even if you think it's for something as harmless as a gas station snack run. It's not worth the risk. TLDR, used my best friend's ID to buy snacks at a convenience store, cashier recognized me, and my friend got investigated for identity theft. Almost ruined his career over a stupid decision. TIFU by accidentally sending a text to my boss that I meant to send to my girlfriend. It started like any normal day. I woke up to my alarm, groggily rolled out of bed, and got ready for work. I didn't have anything particularly exciting lined up for the day, just the usual office grind. But little did I know, one simple, stupid mistake was about to change everything. So, here's the context. I work at a mid-sized marketing firm. My boss, Sarah, is a hard ass but fair. She's one of those bosses who expects a lot, but gives a lot in return. We've had our moments where things got tense, but for the most part, we've had a good working relationship. My girlfriend, Emily, and I have been dating for a few months now, and things were going pretty smoothly. We text a lot throughout the day, little silly things, inside jokes, the usual couple stuff. On this particular day, everything seemed pretty normal. I got to the office, grabbed my coffee, and sat down at my desk. I had a few emails to respond to, a project deadline approaching, and a meeting later in the day. It was just another day in the grind. Around mid-morning, I had a short break and decided to check my phone. Emily had sent me a message saying something like, "Miss you, babe, hope your day's going well." I smiled to myself, thinking about how cute she was. In return, I typed out a response, something like, "I miss you too, can't wait to see you tonight. I've been thinking about how hot you looked last night." Now, let me explain. It was a compliment, sure, but not something I should be sending while at work. It was one of those texts that's meant to be sweet, but when it's sent to the wrong person, it's more than just awkward. After typing it out, I hit send, only I didn't realize something was off. As I glanced up at my computer screen to check my emails, I noticed a notification pop up on my phone. It was a message from Sarah, my boss. I didn't think much of it at first. Sarah is pretty direct, and her messages are often about work. So, without even thinking, I tapped on it to read her message, not realizing I had just sent the same text to her. I opened her reply, which said, "That's quite an interesting message, Mark." My heart sank into my stomach. My brain didn't immediately process what had happened, but the moment I realized the terrible, catastrophic mistake I had made, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I had just sent Sarah a text about how hot she looked last night. I quickly froze, staring at my phone, the words blinking back at me like some cruel joke. There was no way to undo it. I panicked. I opened my messages, and sure enough, there it was, the text I had meant for Emily, sitting innocently in the thread with my boss. My mind went blank. How the hell was I supposed to fix this? I immediately typed an apology. "Oh my God, Sarah, I am so sorry, that was meant for my girlfriend. I didn't mean to send that to you. Please, ignore it." My fingers were shaking, and I hit send before I could second-guess myself. But I didn't get an immediate reply. Time seemed to stretch out, each second feeling like an eternity. I considered my options. I could try to explain, but would she even believe me? Would she just think I was being a creep? My mind raced through all the possible outcomes, each worse than the last. Just then, my phone buzzed again. A new message from Sarah. I opened it, heart pounding, preparing for the worst. She had written, "I figured as much. Just make sure you're not texting me during work hours about that sort of thing. Also, I'll need that presentation you promised me in an hour." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It wasn't a complete disaster. I still had a job, and I wasn't immediately fired. But damn, was I embarrassed. I had just sent my boss a sexually charged message by accident. And not just any boss, Sarah. The one who had a reputation for being unapproachable and cold. But somehow, she had taken it in stride. In the next few moments, I tried to recover as best as I could. I focused on the presentation, made sure everything was in order, and sent it to her before the deadline. I was mortified, but I had a job to do. So I got to work, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. The rest of the day was a blur. I could feel Sarah's eyes on me during the meeting, and I swear, every time I glanced over at her, I caught her stifling a smile. I tried to ignore it, but the tension was palpable. I knew she was thinking about that message. How could she not? Later that afternoon, after the meeting, she came over to my desk. My heart started racing again. Here it was, the moment of truth. I braced myself for the inevitable, the awkwardness that would come with the confrontation. But to my surprise, Sarah didn't say anything about it right away. Instead, she just leaned over and handed me a folder. "Here's the client feedback," she said casually, as if nothing had happened. I blinked, confused. Okay. Thanks." She smiled and walked away without another word. It was then that I realized Sarah was a professional. She was handling this like an absolute pro. But I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Would she hold it against me? Would she mention it again? I guess I would find out eventually. Over the next few weeks, Sarah continued to be her usual self, direct, but fair. We worked together like we always had, and she never brought up the text again. It was like it never happened. But I could tell there was a bit of a shift. She had this knowing look sometimes when she caught my eye, like she was silently laughing at me, but she never spoke about it directly. The worst part? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just one wrong text away from being fired. Every time my phone buzzed, I'd feel a brief surge of panic, wondering if I had sent the wrong message to the wrong person again. Eventually, I did tell Emily about the incident. She laughed her ass off. I was glad she found it funny, but I couldn't help but cringe every time I thought about the mistake I'd made. So, yeah, TIFU by texting my boss a message meant for my girlfriend. Thankfully, it didn't end my career, but it definitely made work a lot more awkward for a while. I'm still waiting for the day Sarah decides to bring it up in front of the whole office. Fingers crossed that doesn't happen anytime soon. TIFU by accidentally causing a panic at my work's office building by using the elevator while a bomb threat was in progress. It all started on a Tuesday morning. I was running late, as usual, because I decided to sleep in a little longer than planned. I quickly grabbed some cereal, threw on the first outfit I could find, and rushed out of my apartment. Normally, I try to avoid being late, but this particular morning felt like any other. I figured I'd just sneak into the office, get my coffee, and get back into the groove of work without any drama. When I arrived at the office building, I noticed something was off. The usual stream of people heading inside seemed thinner than normal, but I didn't think much of it. As I walked into the lobby, I was greeted by the usual security guard, who waved at me distractedly as he manned his desk. I waved back and headed toward the elevator. The lights above the elevator doors blinked as if they were malfunctioning, but again, I didn't think anything of it. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and I stepped inside. Just as I pressed the button for the 12th floor, where my office was, I noticed a commotion near the entrance of the building. Some people were walking out in a hurry, while others seemed to be talking loudly, pointing at something in the distance. I thought maybe there was a fire drill or some sort of emergency, but I was so focused on getting to my desk that I decided to ignore it. I'm not proud of that decision, but in that moment, all I cared about was getting my workday started. As the elevator ascended, I was scrolling through emails on my phone, blissfully unaware of what was happening around me. I pressed the button to stop at the 12th floor, and the elevator came to a halt with a gentle jolt. The doors slid open, revealing the usual scene of cubicles, printers whirring, and people tapping away at their keyboards. I stepped out, took a deep breath, and headed toward the coffee machine. My first priority every morning. But as soon as I entered the kitchen area, I noticed something was off. There were fewer people around, and the ones who were there had serious looks on their faces. A few people were whispering, and I overheard one of them saying something about suspicious activity. At first, I assumed they were talking about the annoying guy from accounting who was always late with his reports, but when I asked what was going on, they turned to me, eyes wide, and said, "Haven't you heard? There's a bomb threat." I blinked in confusion. A bomb threat? What do you mean? One of my coworkers, Karen, I'll call her Karen to protect her identity, although she was far from the type of Karen you're imagining, looked at me like I was an alien. They've evacuated most of the building. The bomb squad is on their way. Didn't you see the emails? Emails? I checked my phone. I had indeed received a few emails that morning, but they were all about minor issues, none of them mentioned a bomb threat. I quickly opened the email inbox and found nothing that referred to anything as serious as a bomb threat. That's when it hit me. I had used the elevator. I remembered that the elevator had opened on the 12th floor without any delay. It had even made a strange noise when I pressed the button, but I hadn't thought much of it. And now, I realized something I should have noticed much sooner. The building had likely been evacuated, but I had, without knowing, used the elevator and made my way to the top. That must have triggered something, right? Before I could process this, the office manager, Brian, rushed into the kitchen, his face pale. Okay, people, everyone needs to leave the building. Now. There's a bomb threat in progress, and we can't take any chances. Everyone must evacuate in an orderly manner. Everyone except for you, he said, pointing directly at me. Me? I had no idea what I did to earn the distinction of being singled out. What did I do? I stammered. Brian sighed and rubbed his forehead, clearly frustrated. The elevators aren't safe to use right now. You need to head down the stairs. You didn't see the email about that? I was starting to panic myself. I had completely ignored any warnings, thinking it was just another typical morning. No, I didn't see anything. I've been in the elevator already. What's happening? I asked, trying to piece together the timeline. Brian's eyes grew wide, and his face became serious. We don't know exactly where the threat is, but the building's been on alert since the threat was made. A few people thought the elevator wasn't safe because it could be rigged to trigger something. There were people already on the phone with the authorities when you got in, and it caused a panic. I stared at him in disbelief. You're telling me he nodded gravely. You used the elevator while everyone else was trying to evacuate. That's likely what set things off. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had inadvertently escalated a tense situation into a full-blown panic, simply by using an elevator that hadn't been declared safe. Brian motioned to the exits. We need to get everyone out. Now, go down the stairs. There's a stairwell near the back of the office, but for now, avoid the elevators. As I stood there, stunned by the series of events that had unfolded, I noticed a few more of my coworkers eyeing me warily as they gathered their belongings and started heading toward the stairwell. I felt the weight of everyone's judgment. My mind raced as I followed the group out of the office and down the stairs, my stomach turning. I had accidentally triggered the panic at work. All I wanted was a cup of coffee, and now, I was the one responsible for everyone having to evacuate. The worst part? The bomb threat turned out to be a hoax. Apparently, someone had called it in just to cause trouble, and the authorities had deemed the threat non-credible within an hour of the evacuation. No bomb was found, but the damage was already done. My colleagues were livid, and I was the talk of the office for the rest of the week. I wish I could say that I learned a valuable lesson that day, but I still use elevators without thinking about the consequences. However, now I always double-check my emails before I step into one. And to this day, every time I see an elevator light blink or hear an odd ding, I can't help but feel a small knot of anxiety in my stomach. The irony is that the only thing I wanted that morning was a cup of coffee. Instead, I got the nickname Elevator Bomber for the next month. I've since learned to pay attention to any and all emails that come my way, especially if they mention elevators. TIFU by trying to impress my girlfriend with my cooking skills and ending up burning down the kitchen. So, to set the scene, I'm not what you'd call a master chef. My culinary skills extend to throwing together some pasta or microwaving a frozen pizza. But my girlfriend, Sophie, she's different. She's one of those people who can make everything from scratch, and it looks amazing. It tastes even better. I'd watch her cook and think, one day, I'll impress her with my skills. This particular Saturday seemed like the perfect opportunity to show her what I could do. We'd been dating for about 6 months at the time, and I was really eager to prove that I wasn't just some guy who couldn't even boil an egg without burning it. Sophie had to go to a yoga class, and I thought, this is it. This is my time to shine. I told her I was going to cook dinner, and she seemed a little hesitant but smiled and said, I'm sure you'll do great. Just don't burn the place down, okay? Those words. They'll haunt me forever. So, I started looking up recipes. I needed something simple but impressive, nothing too basic like spaghetti. I didn't want to give her the impression I wasn't trying. I decided on a chicken parmesan. It seemed easy enough, but also fancy enough to make her think I knew what I was doing. I spent the next hour gathering all the ingredients and setting everything up. Now, here's the first thing I should have learned. I have zero experience with raw chicken. I mean, sure, I've handled a few chicken breasts in my life, but they were always already cooked or frozen. I had no idea what I was doing when it came to breading, seasoning, or, God forbid, handling the oil. I figured I'd watched enough cooking shows to wing it. I found a recipe online that claimed to be foolproof. It was one of those YouTube ones where the person looks like they've been cooking since birth and make everything seem effortless. There were a lot of steps, but I read through it all. Bread the chicken. Heat oil. Cook until golden brown, the recipe instructed. Simple enough, right? So I started by breading the chicken. Of course, because I was using flour, eggs, and breadcrumbs, it got messy. Very messy. My hands were caked in egg and breadcrumbs, and I'm fairly certain I had some flour on my face. But I wasn't about to stop, this was my big moment. I got all the chicken breasts breaded, placed them on a plate, and moved to the next step, frying them. Now, I'd never fried chicken before. I had no idea what temperature the oil should be at. Should I use a thermometer? Who knows? I just poured a bunch of vegetable oil into a pan and cranked up the heat. I figured it would heat up quickly. Spoiler alert, it didn't. And even when it did, I didn't test it to see if it was actually hot enough. I just tossed the chicken in and hoped for the best. Now, here's where things went south. You see, I didn't realize that frying chicken could get a little out of hand if you don't pay attention. I left the chicken in the pan for way too long, the oil was way too hot, and suddenly, I heard a sizzling sound that seemed way too intense. I looked over to see the oil was bubbling and popping like crazy. I panicked. I tried to flip the chicken, but it was stuck. The breading was starting to blacken. I grabbed a spatula and tried to flip the chicken, but I was moving it too aggressively. The oil splashed up, and some of it hit the counter, burning the surface. I quickly grabbed a paper towel to try to stop the splattering. This only made things worse. The oil splashed everywhere, and I was starting to smell something weird, a burnt smell, like my kitchen was being taken over by smoke. In my panic, I completely forgot about the heat. The pan was now smoking, and there was a real sense of danger in the air. The kitchen was filled with the distinct, horrific smell of burnt oil and chicken. I realized, almost too late, that the chicken was now charred beyond recognition. It was practically inedible. But I thought, it's fine. I'll just scrape off the burnt parts and put it in the oven to bake the rest of the way. Big mistake. I put the pan in the oven, turned it to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and set the timer. I was feeling like I might be able to salvage this disaster. But when I went to check on it 15 minutes later, I saw that something was very wrong. The oven was smoking. The kitchen was filled with smoke. In my attempt to make everything look perfect, I had completely forgotten to open a window or turn on the vent hood. The kitchen was now like a smoke-filled war zone. I grabbed the chicken from the oven and immediately started fanning the air to clear it out, but it was no use. The entire place was covered in smoke. The smell of burnt chicken, oil, and whatever else I had ruined was filling every corner of the room. Sophie was still at yoga, and I knew I needed to act fast. I ran to the sink and tried to wash off the burned chicken as if somehow that would make it edible again. It didn't. At this point, I was in full-blown panic mode. I opened all the windows and turned on every fan I could find. But the smoke was so thick I couldn't see anything. My kitchen was like a fog of war. I grabbed the fire extinguisher out of the closet and started to head towards the stove, but I wasn't sure where the fire was, and frankly, I was just trying not to die at this point. I realized there was no fire, but the damage was done. I had burned my kitchen to the ground, well, figuratively, at least. My chicken parmesan was charred to a crisp, the kitchen was covered in smoke, and it smelled like something had died in there. By the time Sophie came home, the smoke had cleared, but the damage was evident. She opened the door, looked at the sad, burnt remains of what was once supposed to be a romantic dinner, and just stared at me. What happened? I stood there, defeated, covered in oil, flour, and sweat, holding up a charred chicken breast like a sad trophy. I tried to cook for you. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I honestly couldn't blame her. So, long story short, I ended up ordering takeout, and Sophie made me promise that from now on, if I wanted to impress her with food, I should stick to something safer, like ordering pizza. She was a good sport about it, but I don't think I'll be cooking again anytime soon. And that, folks, is how I tried to impress my girlfriend with my cooking skills and nearly burned down the kitchen in the process. I'm never cooking again. Never. TIFU. By accidentally inviting my ex to my wedding, I've always considered myself a fairly organized person. I like to have everything planned out well in advance, and I don't mind putting in the effort to make sure that things run smoothly. So, when my fiancé and I started planning our wedding, I took on the task of managing the guest list. We had a small, intimate gathering planned for about 60 people, close friends and family only, no random acquaintances or distant cousins. Simple, but elegant. One person who was definitely not supposed to be on the guest list was my ex, Karen. Our breakup a couple of years ago had been amicable but awkward, and we'd kept our distance ever since. Karen and I had been together for almost 5 years, and while it wasn't a messy breakup, it was still painful. She moved to a different city shortly after we ended things, and we only exchanged the occasional message on social media, mostly about random life updates or mutual friends. So, when I started planning the wedding, I made sure to block her on every platform to avoid any potential drama. I should mention that Karen and I shared a lot of mutual friends. These were people I'd met through her, and they'd stayed in contact with both of us even after the breakup. I wasn't close with any of them anymore, but they were all invited to the wedding because they were still friends with my fiancée, Emily. Emily had no issue with this, but I knew that inviting Karen would just be uncomfortable, to say the least. Now, let's fast forward a few weeks to when I was deep in the weeds of organizing the guest list. We were doing everything digitally. RSVPs were handled through an app that tracked everyone's responses and meal choices. Because I'm a glutton for punishment, I decided to take on the task of entering all the RSVPs myself. It was going fine at first, a lot of yes and a couple of no's from people who couldn't make it, and a few maybe yes from the ones who were still trying to figure things out. But here's where it gets weird. One morning, as I was going through my emails, I got a notification from the wedding app. Karen has RSVP'd yes to your wedding. My heart sank. The first thing I thought was, how the hell did she even find out about this? I mean, I hadn't invited her, so how could she know? I racked my brain, trying to figure out if one of my friends had slipped and mentioned it in front of her, or if Emily had let something slip. But no, everything was supposed to be locked down. I quickly checked the list on the app, and sure enough, there was Karen's name under the yes column, right along with all the other attendees. I panicked. I tried clicking on her name to see how the hell this had happened, but the app wouldn't let me edit anything without sending out another update to all the guests, which was the last thing I wanted to do. I immediately texted Emily to explain what was going on, hoping she'd have some insight. Emily responded almost immediately. "Are you sure it's not a mistake?" she asked. "Maybe someone else with a similar name RSVP'd and the app just glitched or something?" I didn't think that was it. I knew Karen's full name was unique enough to not be confused with someone else's. But I didn't want to worry Emily unnecessarily, so I just told her I'd handle it. I then decided to send a direct message to Karen on Facebook. It was the only way I could think of to clear this up quickly. I typed something along the lines of, "Hey, I saw you RSVP'd to my wedding. Just to clarify, I didn't send you an invitation, and I'm not sure how you got that link. Can you let me know what's going on?" It felt awkward, and I didn't love the idea of reaching out to her, but I needed to get to the bottom of this. A few minutes later, Karen responded. "I got the link through your cousin Jenny. She's the one who sent me the invite. I'm really excited for you guys, by the way. I can't wait to see you walk down the aisle." My stomach dropped. Of course, Jenny was my cousin, but she was also one of the people who had stayed in touch with Karen after we broke up. I hadn't thought about it, but Jenny and Karen had remained pretty close. They'd even hung out together a few times, which had always made me uncomfortable, but I didn't have the heart to tell Jenny to cut ties with her. I was furious. Jenny, without asking me or Emily, had invited Karen to my wedding. It felt like a massive betrayal, and I couldn't understand why Jenny would think it was okay. I had no intention of letting Karen be part of our special day, especially not after everything that had happened. I told Karen I was sorry, but that I couldn't have her at the wedding. I tried to be polite but firm. "I understand you're excited, but this wedding is going to be small and intimate, and we're not inviting anyone outside the list we've already sent. I hope you understand." To her credit, Karen was respectful. She said she understood and wouldn't show up, but I could tell she was disappointed. It felt awful to turn her down, but I wasn't going to let her show up uninvited and potentially cause a scene. After that, I called Jenny. I asked her why she invited Karen without checking with me first. Jenny, somewhat sheepishly, explained that she thought I would be fine with it since she and Karen were still friends. She thought I was over the breakup and that I wouldn't mind her being there. I was fuming. I told Jenny that I was absolutely not okay with Karen being at the wedding, and that I felt completely betrayed. Jenny tried to apologize, but honestly, I was too upset to really listen. I ended up telling her that I couldn't have her at the wedding either if she was going to keep pushing this. She apologized profusely, but the damage was done. I had to scramble to remove Karen from the guest list and send out a new invitation to a couple of people to fill in the empty spot. The day of the wedding was, thankfully, smooth, but it was a reminder of how messy relationships can get. My cousin Jenny still tried to make amends, but it was awkward for months. I don't think I'll ever forget the day I realized my ex was going to show up at my wedding. It's a memory I'm sure I'll be telling for a long time. Moral of the story? Always double-check who's on your guest list. And if you're planning a wedding, make sure your guest list is tight, no room for surprises like this. TIFU, by trying to impress my crush with a home-cooked dinner. So, this all started when I finally gathered the courage to ask out this girl I had been crushing on for months. Let's call her Sarah. We had met at a mutual friend's party, and after a few weeks of texting and getting to know each other, I felt pretty confident that she was into me too. We had planned a casual dinner at my place, just the two of us, which felt like a perfect opportunity to impress her. Now, I'm not the best cook, but I figured it couldn't hurt to try, right? I had seen countless cooking shows, YouTube tutorials, and my friends were always posting their own fancy meals on Instagram. How hard could it be? I decided to prepare a 3-course meal, an appetizer, a main course, and dessert. For the appetizer, I thought a fancy charcuterie board would do the trick. I grabbed a variety of cheeses, some olives, prosciutto, and a few crackers. I was feeling pretty good about this part. It wasn't rocket science, right? Just assemble the stuff on a wooden board and call it art. The main course was where I really wanted to shine. I had heard from a few people that risotto was a great choice for a date night, classy, comforting, and flavorful. I'd seen the recipe 100 times, so I figured I could nail it. I bought all the ingredients, arborio rice, vegetable broth, mushrooms, and a bunch of fresh herbs. I watched a few YouTube videos, gathered my ingredients, and felt ready to tackle this. For dessert, I wanted something simple but indulgent. I settled on molten chocolate lava cakes, because who doesn't love warm gooey chocolate? I found a recipe that seemed foolproof and was confident I could pull it off. Now, let me tell you, I was determined to make everything from scratch. No shortcuts, no pre-made sauces, none of that. I was going to make the kind of dinner that would blow her away, or at least make her think I had my life together. The night of the dinner, I spent the entire afternoon prepping. I wanted everything to be perfect. My kitchen was a mess, but I was powering through it. I set the table with candles, fancy napkins, and a bottle of wine I bought specifically for the occasion. It was looking good. I even made sure to vacuum the living room and tidy up the bathroom. This was it, the night I could potentially start a relationship with Sarah. She arrived at 7 p.m., just as I had finished setting the table. We exchanged pleasantries and sat down. I was already sweating bullets, but I pretended everything was fine. I offered her some wine, and we started with the charcuterie board. She seemed impressed by it, and we were chatting casually. I felt like we were off to a good start. But then things began to go wrong. As I started cooking the risotto, I realized I might have underestimated the complexity of it. It was supposed to be creamy and tender, but as I stirred the rice, it just wasn't coming together the way I'd hoped. The rice started to stick to the pan, and I could feel my anxiety rising. I tried to salvage it by adding more broth, but it just wasn't absorbing correctly. I didn't want to admit I was struggling, so I kept stirring, pretending everything was under control. I could feel Sarah's eyes on me, and I had this intense pressure to make it seem like I knew exactly what I was doing. To distract her, I asked her about her day, but she seemed a little too quiet, almost like she could tell something was wrong. I finally plated the risotto, though it was way too soupy. It wasn't the rich, creamy dish I had envisioned. I tried to save face by adding some extra Parmesan on top, hoping that would somehow improve the flavor. But when I put the plate in front of her, I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She didn't say anything, but her silence spoke volumes. She took a bite and chewed slowly. I braced myself for a compliment, but instead, she just said, "It's interesting." I tried to brush it off with a laugh, but inside I was crumbling. I kept telling myself it wasn't a big deal. I could fix it with the lava cakes, right? Wrong. I had carefully followed the recipe for the lava cakes, making sure the timing was perfect so that they would come out just right. But as I took them out of the oven, I realized I had forgotten one crucial thing: the ramekins I was using were way too small. They were also not non-stick. When I tried to flip them onto the plates, half of the cake stuck to the sides of the ramekin, leaving a mess of molten chocolate on the inside. The other half was overcooked, and it wasn't even remotely lava-like. At this point, I was fighting to keep it together. I couldn't let Sarah see how stressed I was, so I just smiled and served the disaster of a dessert anyway. I placed the slightly charred and deflated cakes on the plates and set them down in front of her. She gave me an awkward smile, clearly trying to be polite. "They're interesting too," she said. I couldn't hold back anymore. I just blurted out, "Honestly, I'm so sorry. This is a disaster. I have no idea what I'm doing." I let out a nervous laugh, trying to downplay the entire situation. Sarah's eyes softened, and she put her fork down. "Hey, it's okay," she said. "I think it's really sweet that you tried to make all of this for me. Plus, I'm honestly just glad we're spending time together." Her kindness made me feel a little better, but the evening was already a mess. I had been so focused on impressing her that I forgot to just enjoy the moment. Instead of talking about the food, we ended up talking more about our mutual interests and the weirdness of trying to be perfect. She told me a funny story about how her last date had tried to impress her with fancy cocktails but ended up spilling half of the drink on her lap. We both laughed, and the tension lifted. By the end of the night, we were just enjoying each other's company, and I realized that it wasn't about the food. It was about the connection. Still, I can't shake the feeling of embarrassment. My perfect dinner didn't go as planned, and I'm pretty sure Sarah knew it wasn't going well halfway through, but she was kind enough to not make a big deal about it. After she left, I promised myself I'd never try to impress someone with a homemade dinner again. Well, at least not until I can actually cook. Maybe next time we'll just go out to a restaurant. So, yeah, TIFU by trying to impress my crush with a home-cooked dinner and completely failing at it. At least it wasn't the worst date ever, right? TIFU by accidentally starting a fire at my friend's house while trying to make a romantic dinner. So, I have this thing for cooking. I'm not a professional or anything, but I can make a solid dinner. Over the last few months, I had been talking to this girl, Emma, who I met at work. We clicked instantly, shared a love for films, music, and food. We were both new to the city, and had been spending time getting to know each other. I really liked her, so naturally, I decided that I wanted to make a move. I thought to myself, what better way to impress her than cooking a romantic dinner at her place? I had made a few dinners for myself, and even a couple for friends, so I felt confident I could pull this off. Little did I know, I was about to turn a casual date night into a full-on disaster. The plan was simple. I'd cook a nice meal, something fancy but not too complicated, and then we'd watch a movie after. I asked her if she had any dietary restrictions. She told me she didn't, but she mentioned she liked Mediterranean food, specifically Greek cuisine. I thought, okay, I can do that. How hard can it be? I spent the entire day prepping the ingredients: chicken, tzatziki, pita, and a side of roasted veggies. I even made a homemade hummus, which I was pretty proud of. The meal was going to be amazing. I had all the ingredients in place, the oven preheated, and I was feeling like a top chef. I sent Emma a message letting her know that I'd be at her place in about an hour, and that I was excited to cook for her. When I got to Emma's place, she greeted me with a hug and a smile. She had set the table, lit a few candles, and poured a glass of wine for both of us. Everything was looking perfect. I was feeling good. I was in the zone. This was going to be a night to remember. I started cooking, and as the aroma of roasted chicken filled the air, I could see Emma's face light up. We chatted about random things, our favorite movies, travel experiences, and even some embarrassing stories. I was getting more comfortable, and we were both having a good time. I was so focused on making sure the food was perfect that I didn't notice the time. It was already getting late, and I had been cooking for over an hour. At this point, I realized I hadn't checked on the oven in a while. I walked over to it, opened the door, and immediately saw a puff of smoke escape. My heart sank. The chicken was blackened. Not just a little charred, not even a crisped up edge. No, this chicken was absolutely incinerated. It was black, hard, and totally inedible. I quickly shut the oven door to stop the smoke from spreading. Everything okay? Emma called out from the living room, clearly hearing the panic in my voice. Yeah, just a little smoke, I responded, trying to keep things calm, but I could feel the heat of embarrassment rising. I started to panic. I didn't want to let her down. This was supposed to be the perfect evening, and now I was standing in her kitchen, staring at a disaster. I tried to salvage what I could, pulling the burnt chicken out and quickly trying to salvage the roasted vegetables in the oven. I thought maybe I could just serve those, and we could laugh about it later. But the smoke was getting worse, and now I was starting to smell something else: plastic. I turned around to see that the plastic cutting board I had been using had somehow gotten too close to the hot oven and was starting to melt. It was the most surreal moment. I could feel the sweat on my forehead. How was this happening? Why was everything going wrong? I frantically grabbed the cutting board and tossed it into the sink, but the damage had already been done. There was a noticeable burn mark on the countertop, and the kitchen was now filling with smoke. Emma appeared at the door, looking confused. "What's going on here?" she asked, and I could tell she was trying to keep things light, but I could see the concern in her eyes. I think I might have overcooked the chicken," I said weakly. I didn't want to tell her about the plastic board. I didn't even know how to explain that. That's okay, it happens, she said, but I could tell she was now seeing the smoke and the mess in the kitchen. She walked over to the window and opened it, trying to air things out. I stood there, feeling like a failure. My confidence was completely shattered. It was supposed to be a romantic evening, and now it looked like I had just set her kitchen on fire. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment, the smell of burnt food and plastic hanging in the air. I took a deep breath, trying to collect myself. Okay, this is a disaster, I said, forcing a laugh. But I promise you, I'm better than this. I can make us a new dinner, or we can order takeout, or, before I could finish, Emma burst out laughing. Not in a mocking way, but in the kind of way that made me feel like maybe everything wasn't ruined. This is hilarious, she said between giggles. Honestly, I've had worse cooking disasters, so this is kind of refreshing. I stared at her, confused. You're not mad? No, not at all, she said, still laughing. In fact, I think this just makes the night even more memorable. I mean, we're already laughing about it, right? That's when I realized something. Emma wasn't upset. She wasn't angry. She wasn't disappointed. She was just happy to be spending time with me. It didn't matter that the dinner was a disaster. What mattered was that we were both making the best of the situation, and we were genuinely enjoying each other's company. We ended up ordering pizza, which we ate while watching a random comedy movie on Netflix. By the end of the night, we were both in stitches from laughing about my cooking fiasco. As it turned out, Emma had had her own cooking disasters in the past, and we bonded over our shared ability to completely ruin a meal. We didn't go on any romantic adventures after that evening, but we continued hanging out and getting to know each other better. In the end, that night taught me something important. Sometimes the best moments happen when things don't go as planned, and it's the people who can laugh at themselves who make life a lot more fun. I never became a great cook, but at least I have one unforgettable story to tell, and Emma and I are still friends. Who knows? Maybe next time, I'll just order the takeout and save myself the trouble. Or maybe I'll stick to simple dishes. Anything that doesn't involve fire would be a good start. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.